Hello and welcome to Just Onside, your regular dose of Premier League action. And as always, I'm joined by the main man himself, Brother Owis. Owis, how are you, sir?
I take offense to the main man. You've come on. We're yeah, we're co-hosting this. We're equal partners in this. But I'm doing well, thank you. Good start to the week. This is Monday evening, just for our viewers. But I'm doing well. How about yourself? Feeling better after yesterday's result?
Yes, it was. Obviously, you're referring to the Leeds result. So, I mean, we were at a wedding function. So my enjoyment of the wedding was slightly tempered by the fact that Leeds were two down. But thankfully, we got an equaliser. Disappointed, but I suppose if you get a 95th minute equaliser, you're always going to be reasonably relieved and pleased. So on the whole, pleased, but enough about Leeds.
I was just
But
gonna say it's been a while since you picked up any points, but let's carry
yes,
on.
yeah. I mean, it's a long time since we scored two goals as well. So really, it was good. It was good. In the end, I suppose a point's better than no points. But let's move on to more important matters. Uh, the Community Shield, the curtain raiser. Uh, at the last show, you were probably saying it was maybe City weren't going to take it too seriously. I think by the reactions of the coaches, the players, they took it very seriously. So the game was maybe quite a tight affair. Uh, a very late equaliser from the Arsenal, which we'll talk about because obviously it created some sort of reaction from Guardiola, and I thought the Arsenal penalty takers were superb. I thought they were magnificent. So uh, not the best of football games, but do you expect you've got two quality sides? So it was a very I suppose it was almost like a game of chess, wasn't it? Really, it was a game where no quarter given. Space was very limited, and really you needed some exceptional moments of quality, or perhaps a bit of luck in Arsenal's case. But what were your thoughts? How did you see the game?
I think you asked me the question, Ayub, on the last episode as to which team did it mean more this game, and I suggested, well, Manchester City are not going to be worried too much about Community Shields off the back of a treble win and off the back of three Premier League titles in a row. I think they've earned themselves a day off from being judged whether or not what this means in terms of the result and the significance of the result. I think for Arsenal, it was a case of being able to compete and able to show that they could kind of stand and go toe to toe with Manchester City, similar to what they did last year. In terms of the game on the whole, you're right. I mean, I ran back in from the wedding function, got in at 3:59, ready for the game, so got myself comfortable. In the end, the game itself, I know what you mean when you say it wasn't a game of the highest quality in that sense. I actually thought it was a game played by two teams that clearly respect one another in terms of the
Mm.
fact that they've got the players, the personnel to hurt one another. It was interesting to see. First 20, 25 minutes, I thought Manchester City were on top without creating much. I would say they had a lot of the ball. Declan Rice and Arsenal's midfield were trying to press in when the opportunity presented itself, but it was quite noticeable. Ortega in goal for Manchester City being really aggressive with his positioning, creating essentially one more outfield player, and therefore creating Arsenal some problems there. But Manchester City didn't really create much. Then Arsenal obviously had, I think Roy Keane at halftime called it a second win, but they created some good opportunities when you think about the cutback from Ben White to Havertz. Havertz did well actually to get an effort away. I thought Martinelli on the follow up trying to beat multiple bodies. Good block by John Stones. Then the big chance with Saka's cutback for Havertz. Probably should put it away, although it's a bit of a swinger on his right foot and a good save by the goalkeeper. But I think 0-0 was probably a fair scoreline, although Havertz will definitely want to have that one back. In terms of the second half, yeah, I think again not much in the game. There were some big moments. I think as the kind of game progressed, you weren't quite sure. You felt one goal would probably be enough. It didn't feel like there were multiple goals in it. And it was interesting to me that after arguably one of the better performers or one of the best performers on the field, Jury and Timber, who I thought were very assured at left back defensively and even offensively, trying to give something on that side, but he definitely gave Arsenal a little bit of control. It was interesting that the goal from Cole Palmer came immediately after he went off. Phil Foden, if you remember, turns Partey incredibly well, runs away from him. You're not catching him, as Lee Dixon spoke about on colour commentary. And once Arsenal were then kind of chasing, the ball gets played to the left side. You've got the overlap. Kieran Tierney has to slightly respect the overlap, and then Cole Palmer, as he showed in a few moments with the under-21s this summer as well. He's got a wonderful left foot, and he's obviously found the corner past Ramsdale. I think it looked like that was going to be the game. City had another great opportunity through Phil Foden. Again, Arsenal pushing forward a little bit. Ramsdale with a wonderful save, a lot spoken about.
Lucky save.
Well, he's come out and made himself big, and you earn a little bit of luck. But you're right, Foden will probably want to have that back. I think the game at that point, you're thinking it's going to be 1-0. Manchester City normally tend to see those kinds of games out. And then, Arsenal from a corner, retrieved back by Saka into Trossard, and 2 deflections. One off the immediate foot, and then a Kanji, I think it was, and then it trickles past Ortega. So, look, in the end, the game itself, I thought it actually showed me as an Arsenal fan, there were some things that I really liked in terms of the fact that they competed well. They looked, for the most part, as Manchester City's equals. And I just mean in terms of they did belong on the pitch. It wasn't a case of there was a clear gulf. There's a gulf in what I would call championship experience. Yes, there's no dispute in that. But I think just in terms of the game itself, it was a game played between 2, I would say, very, very good teams. So I think Arsenal can take a little bit. To what extent? I think Aaron Ramsdale was fairly transparent afterwards. He wasn't sure, and I don't really read too much into it. Ultimately, I still count it as a drawn game. You might think I'm tempering my joy, but it's a drawn game. Penalties are just to decide who wins it. Great penalties, like you said, Fabio Vieira's especially to win the penalty shootout. But in the end, I think there's some things to like. I think there's some things for Arsenal, especially tactically. I'm interested to see how that develops, especially with Rice's positioning, which I think we'll come on to in future episodes. But
in fact, just on Rice, I mean, I maybe we can talk about it in future, but just maybe a minute or two on what did you think of his performance? I mean, what do you think of the position he played in as well?
The one noticeable aspect for me, which I'll be keeping a very close eye on, is if Mikel Arteta is going to play Declan Rice in addition to Thomas Partey. Now, Arsenal play a very unique formation. They play essentially a 4-1-4-1, or a 4-1-2-3, depending on how you look at it. But last year, Granit Xhaka was on that kind of left-sided midfield, but not next to Partey. Partey dominates that area all by himself, or Arsenal want him to control that area all by himself. But Xhaka's normally in between the lines in terms of receiving the ball. And Declan Rice has never played that position for West Ham, and he's never really played that position for England. That's not to say he can't, but he hasn't to date. And what was noticeable to me yesterday was when Gabriel and even Partey had the ball, Rice would withdraw into this kind of left centre-back, left-back position, which is not something we've not seen before, by the way. But in this current Mikel Arteta team, Granit Xhaka clearly played as a similar position to Odegaard in the sense of Odegaard's on the right, but advanced ahead of Partey. And Xhaka was advanced ahead of Partey on the left-hand side, right? So hence he created a good relationship with Martinelli last year. Rice would often find himself withdrawing. So it's a more defensive position. You might have seen multiple times in the game, Gabriel looking to bring the ball forward, but Rice was actually a little bit either behind him or to the side of him. Whereas normally last year, that's a 10 to 15 yard pass threaded through into Xhaka's feet, who turns into Martinelli. That's how they like to play. So the question is it by design that Arteta wants a little bit more control, and hence Rice takes up those defensive positions or more defensive mindset because he's a defensive player by nature? Or is this just something that over time he'll get more comfortable? Because receiving the ball between the lines on the half turn is very different to playing in the number 6 role, where you're essentially chaperoning the back to the back line, being that kind of comfort for the defensive back line, let's say, and mopping up and intercepting. And he's got great interception statistics from last year and beyond. So for me, it's a case of wait and see, because I still think his best role probably would still be the number 6. You saw that one athletic recovery he put on De
Yeah.
Bruyne, where he absolutely just ate up the yards. And that's his biggest strength. If I said to you what's Declan Rice's biggest strength, you'd say his athleticism. He's great at getting around the park. So I think it's a wait and see. But that was very noticeable to me, that the pass that Gabriel would normally find, or even Partey would find, into Xhaka last year, which is like 10 yards forward, 15 yards further forward, this time Rice was taking very defensive positions, because that's what he knows. By design or by nature, I think time will tell. It's probably too early.
I mean, certainly from my point of view, I mean, I'll talk about Rice quickly. It certainly wasn't the performance I'd expect from a 100 million player, because it was quite a limited role that he had. And I think that's my concern, because if that's the role that Arteta sees Rice playing, then you don't pay 100 million for a player just to do that. For 100 million, you'd want somebody to influence games. So I just sort of felt that it was a very safe performance, but it's a performance that I'd expect a lot of midfielders to do.
The only pushback I would give to that is he's playing against the best team in Europe, and that's indisputable. So you're not going to have the ball. Therefore, you're going to by default retreat. That's not to say Arsenal didn't have that much of the ball either. I'm just saying there are going to be periods of time when you're not going to have the ball. So by default, you're going to get into a certain position. And I think there is sometimes this kind of, I want to say arrogance, but this, defending is just as important as offensive play. Now, if you're asking me which one of the two is more difficult, without a shadow of a doubt, attacking play is much more difficult to create and harness and optimize than defensive play. Maybe we can get into that at some point. But you can win a title also by being fairly solid as well. And there's no doubt that he offers you that in abundance. But look, I take your point, but I think it's his first game, and they were going up against the best team in Europe. So I think
and I'll just quick. I mean, you've covered most of the points, so I don't really want to repeat what you've said. But in terms of the performance, I thought Arsenal were up for it. They're absolutely up for it. I think the press, certainly in the first 15, 20 minutes, was excellent. The energy levels were superb. And I certainly think that they really wanted to win the game. And I think it was the same for Man City as well. But I think it was an even contest. It was a contest where really it was going to be on a flip of a coin. It was, and I did think that one goal would separate the two clubs. Excellent goal from Cole Palmer. It will be interesting. We've talked about this already about the under-21s as to what happens now. He deserves to be playing a lot more frequently than I think he will at Man City. So I'm not sure what his position is going to be, whether it's going to be very much like Foden, where perhaps he has to bide his time, but there is a future at Manchester City because he's a quality football player. The equaliser. I mean, I think if I'm Guardiola, I'm absolutely, I would say tearing my hair out, but I'm similar to Pep. So maybe his beard. But it was when Saka's passed it to Trossard, I was expecting somebody to close the space, and I know it's the 95th minute or 98th minute, but really he was allowed far too much space. Albeit it's a lucky goal, but he should never have been in the position where he's had an opportunity to shoot. But then the penalties, I thought Arsenal were exceptional. A lot of people say sometimes penalty is a lottery. I don't think so. I think you can be an expert at penalty taking. And yesterday, Arsenal were superb. I mean, I was surprised by De Bruyne's penalty. Now, I know he's obviously trying to put it in the roof, but really that I would not expect somebody of that caliber to take a penalty in that manner. But the Arsenal penalty taking was superb. I think was there a deserved winner? I don't think so. I think ideally it would have been. I think you sort of alluded to it. I think a draw would have been a fair result. And sometimes maybe it might be an idea just to share, because I think this American obsession that somebody has to win. But maybe it's a cup final, and maybe there has to be a winner in a cup final. But with the Community Shield, I don't know. Maybe it would have been better. It would have been a draw. But an okay game. But it's the first game of the season, and maybe I suppose we shouldn't be expecting too much. But certainly, fitness levels were really, really excellent. But it was really interesting because there was something that happened at the end of the game, or at least there was something that really irritated Pep Guardiola. It was the fact that there was 8 minutes added. There is a new ruling now that's been introduced. It's not to everybody's agreement, certainly not the players and the managers. But I don't know, Ois, would you like to elaborate and explain what this new ruling is all about, and maybe comment on it and what your thoughts are?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I was surprised. We weren't actually going to discuss this, were we? But throughout the day, it became more and more of a
Mm.
topic. So we discussed together that actually this seems to have gotten more legs than what we thought it might,
Yeah,
and
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
therefore we should probably cover it. And just in a bit of a nutshell, obviously Leandro Trossard's goal that you alluded to, Ayub, and although you did say he got a fair bit of space, it was a nice feint for him actually to drop the defender. But anyway, we move on. But no, look,
You were watching a different game.
I
Or
think
maybe I was watching a different game. Or maybe my mind was on the Leeds Cardiff game.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he scores in the 101st minute, and there were 8 minutes of injury time that were allocated, and in those 8 minutes there was a header at the far post which Thomas Partey and Kyle Walker contested, both of whom assumed a head injury, which I think required around 5 minutes stoppage. So it made sense that the game was going to go on a lot longer than even the 8 minutes that were allocated. Now, Pep Guardiola, after the game, spoke about these new rules that the authorities have issued with a view to, I guess, essentially improve the product on the pitch. And we'll get on to whether or not there's an issue shortly in the game. But that's essentially what it was. He was complaining about the fact that the game went on too long. Mikel Arteta spoke about it after the game, that we all need to get used to having 100-minute games. What he means by 100-minute games is essentially the clock duration, because obviously the game clock does not stop. So whereas historically we've always spoken about 90 minutes, and now in recent vernacular we speak about 90 minutes plus injury time. Now it's pretty much 100 minutes, I would say, moving forward. So, I mean, the first question is, does he have a point? And I think on the whole, I don't think he does. Because the fact of the matter is, this is not geared, the rule changes are not geared in any way to kind of help one particular team or not. If anything, it aids the teams that are very proficient at keeping the ball and the best teams, because the best teams want to play for the longest, because over time, talent and skill should win out, right? So the question is, do we have an issue? Do we have an issue in the Premier League? And we've discussed this, if you remember, you've been one of our earlier podcasts about rule changes. And I'm a big advocate of having an interactive playing clock, which means that rather than have this kind of 90-minute clock that doesn't stop, we would have a clock that measures how long the ball is in play. And that would stop when the ball's out of play. And what that does is it polices the situations of gamesmanship, and where goalkeepers are taking too long taking goal kicks, when restarts are taking too long, teams are taking a certain amount of time taking throw-ins and what have you. So just to explain to you a little bit of the statistics, the Premier League in 2023, the amount of time that the ball was in play was 54 minutes and 49 seconds. I have it. Let me just double check, because I do want to get that right. So yeah, 54 minutes and 49 seconds. Now, 10 years ago, in the season 2012-2013, that was 56 minutes and 23 seconds in terms of how long the ball was actually in play. So that's a shrinkage, Ayub, of 1 minute and 34 seconds in 10 years. The lowest amount of time before that was in 2010-2011. Now, there was a game this season, Ayub, between Aston Villa and Brentford. So I've just given you the average time, yeah? 54 minutes and 49 seconds the ball was in play. There was a game this season between Aston Villa and Brentford. Aston Villa won 4-0. Do you want to guess how long the ball was in play?
It's probably ridiculously low, isn't it, really? So 49 minutes.
Try 43 minutes and 26 seconds.
Wow.
In a game that's supposed to run for 90 minutes. Now, of course, 90 minutes covers all the stoppages and what have you. But given that the average in the Premier League is 54 minutes and 49, there was a game that was more than 10 minutes less in terms of actual action time. Now, it was 4-0, so there were plenty of goals. But even still, 43 minutes and 26 seconds. That is ridiculous. Now, in terms of the European leagues, that ranks fourth. The French league, which I know clearly is near and dear to your heart, was 55 minutes and 59 seconds, which is about a minute 10 seconds longer in terms of actual in-game time. Now, so the question is, those are the statistics in terms of whether or not we have an issue. And like I said, 2022, 2023 saw 54 minutes and 49 seconds of game time. The lowest before that time was 2010, 2011. Now, just to give you a little bit of an idea in terms of averages of how long it takes to restart games, if I may just quickly. Free kicks, roughly about 33 seconds. So this is what's the average delay for these events. So taking a free kick, about 33 seconds. Corners, similar 33 seconds. Goal kick, about 30. Throw-in, 16 seconds. Penalty, because quite often there's a lot of remonstration going on and what have you, 112 seconds. That's nearly 2 minutes of play, Yub. Kickoffs after goals, 72 seconds. So imagine a penalty. It takes 112 minutes to take the damn thing, and then another 72 seconds if they score for us to kick off again. That's 3 minutes of actual lost play. Now that's just the general. Now, what I would say is, what are the statistics in terms of where which teams are the worst offenders? Well, generally speaking, Manchester City have last season had an average in-game time of 60 minutes and 19. They were the best, which makes sense, right? Because they were the most proficient. You'd think they're the most proficient in keeping the ball, which means arguably the ball's going out less, arguably. Yes, you've got the opposition perhaps trying to slow things down, but they were top, Liverpool were second. But 60 minutes, so games involving Manchester City see 60 minutes of game time, which is more than 5 minutes more than the average. Yeah, remember the average that I gave you, which was the worst team, do you think, in the Premier League? In terms of, I shouldn't say worst teams, let me rephrase. Which team do you think had the lowest in-game time that involved this team? So obviously,
Everton.
Nope. They were bottom six. Everton were bottom six.
Yeah, it's got to be a team at the bottom. So, Southampton?
You're wrong. Surprisingly, it's Newcastle United, a team that achieved Champions League football. So that's
surprising. That really is surprising.
About 60 minutes. So Manchester City have their average in-game time for games involving Manchester City. So the 38 games that Man City played, 60 minutes and 19 seconds. Newcastle, 51 minutes and 5 seconds. That's 9 minutes less. 9 minutes of action, of less action in games involving Newcastle. Now, Newcastle will argue, well, hang on, that's teams also slowing us down. That's not just us. But then you look at what's the average delay time before restarting play. So that is in your control, right?
Yeah.
What's the average delay time before restarting play? How does each team fare? Liverpool are the fastest at 23.6. So 23.6 seconds, they start in play again, which kind of, you would argue is consistent with their brand. The heavy metal football Jurgen Klopp speaks about, their throw-in coach talks about whoever's the nearest to the ball at the time of the throw-in, take it. Liverpool are the fastest at 23.6. Leeds weren't too bad, by the way. 27.1.
Didn't do us any good though.
I was going to say, which is surprising.
We should have slowed it down.
No, which is surprising given the amount of times they've had to fish the ball out of the back of the net to take kickoffs. But which team do you think was the worst? So this is in your control to some extent. Yeah, the average delay time before restarting play. Liverpool were first, 23.6 seconds. Which team do you think was bottom of that table?
Everton. I'm just going to keep on saying Everton.
Everton.
Make sure I get it right.
Everton, it was a good guess. They were up in the bottom three. But Brentford were the slowest team in terms of the average delay in terms of restart, 31.4 seconds. But Newcastle were 29.5. They were the second worst. So the point is, Newcastle, even in terms of the time they take, clearly They are 19th out of the 20 teams. Average delay time before goal kicks. Liverpool, again, the fastest, 22.3. Again, looking to get on with it. Manchester City second, 24.2 seconds, wanting to get on with it. Guess which team is bottom in terms of average delay time before goal kicks?
Wolves.
Newcastle.
Newcastle.
36 seconds. So
All right.
Liverpool at 22.3 in taking goal kicks. Newcastle 36. That Newcastle's 36 seconds to take goal kicks average is 3 seconds more than the next team, which is your favorite team, Everton. 33 seconds. So again, clearly, I lay out those statistics to say clearly there's teams are manipulating it, because you'd expect the averages to be a lot closer. Teams are, and whether you call it game management, the old taking the sting out of the game, whatever it may be. Average delay time before throw-ins. Leicester surprisingly were the fastest. Man City, Liverpool next, Chelsea, United thereafter. Makes sense. The better teams trying to really crack on with things. Brentford again being last. Newcastle were more mid-table around this, but Brentford being last. Now you may argue that's because they're looking to get some of their defenders up, and maybe they're taking longer throw-ins and all the rest of it. But it just gives you a bit of an indicator. Liverpool again, fastest in terms of delays before free kicks, 31.3%. Who's the slowest in terms of average delay time before free kicks?
Newcastle.
Correct, 40.9. So Brentford being next slowest. So clearly there's a recurring theme in terms of the teams that are, especially in the ones that it's in their control to some extent. And Newcastle look are a very good team. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just saying clearly teams are strategically making decisions in terms of how much time they want to spend. There was a quick statistic that I want to just quickly give you about, I think Brentford, the longest average delay in a game last season in the Premier League was Brentford away to Man City. 45.5 seconds average delay across everything. So every time that they were just, and it makes sense. You're at the Etihad. They won 2-1. You're looking to play as less football as possible, right? You're trying to reduce the amount of time for Manchester City's skill and talent to show out. Look, so the question is, I lay all that out to say, look, is there a bit of an issue? And I think the authorities have looked at that and said, look, we want to improve the product on the pitch. Fans, and I'm not saying this is the reason why they've done it, but I think ultimately the fans pay, whether it's through the gates, whether it's through TV revenue. We know what TV rights means in terms of the end. When we think about players' wages and what have you, TV rights is a massive, massive part of the income that allows footballers to earn massive sums of money. I think all this is making sure that TV companies, that fans and what have you have enough bang for their buck. And when you see teams strategically taking advantage and slowing things down, and you're getting less actual action compared to previous years, I think this is done with a view to improving that. Now, you can question the methods they use, and that's what Guardiola did. He said, I don't think 10 minutes is going to improve anything. But I still think the measure is one that's warranted and needed, because ultimately people pay, and it's an entertainment business, to watch a game of football, not to watch the goalkeeper take the ball from the left-hand side of the penalty box, roll it over to the right-hand side of the penalty box, then go over to the post, clean his studs, which are already clean anyway, bang his studs twice against the post, then take a long run up and then boot it, and it's been about 45 seconds of nothingness. So I think...
But will it deal with that? That's my issue, because I'm very much like you in terms of, I think if they really are serious, it should be about in-game time. That to me is, you identify maybe an average, maybe 55 minutes. And that will deal with the issues, because ultimately it doesn't really matter. I mean, at the end of the day, if it's about being in play, players will know that if a goalkeeper is cleaning his studs, he knows that this is not going to count. So therefore it's absolutely no point. But he knows as soon as he kicks the ball, that's when the clock starts again. This is, again, is it going to deal with a situation? Because players will now think, right, rather than a 90-minute game, it's a 100-minute game. Is it genuinely going to try and influence in terms of time wasting? I mean, I think it's something that has to be tried. Whether this is the right thing to try, I'm not sure. but I think it needs to be addressed. I mean, I've too many teams are taking liberties, and too many teams are allowed to get away with taking liberties. So something has to be done. But just on this point, I mean, Rafael Varane, he's come up with a statement. I mean, I'll offer you my thoughts afterwards. But what's your thoughts on? I mean, you've read the statement. What's your thoughts on his statement based on this new ruling?
Rafael Varane. So Rafael Varane's come out with a statement, I think today, suggesting that the players had, and I imagine this was done via online call or what have you, they met with the FA when they were informed by the FA of these new rules, let's say. And his argument was that essentially this is going to lead to longer games, more intense games, because they're trying to drive the increased stoppages out of the game. And his third main point was that this would then, there's no understanding or tolerance of players' fatigue when it comes to them being brandished with yellow cards and red cards for dissent or for kicking the ball away or whatever it may be. What he's suggesting is, well, the longer the game, the more tired we get as footballers, and the more tired we get as footballers, there's no real understanding of it. You're going to give us yellow cards even if we just kick the ball here or what have you. Now, I want to take his comments at face value first. Rafael Varane's 30 years of age. If you remember, after the World Cup, he retired from international duty, much to the dismay of the French public and the French national coach, Didier Deschamps. So this is somebody who I listened to in the sense of, well, and I think he spoke about it once he retired, that this schedule is difficult. Now, do I also think he's achieved all that he wants to do with France as well? Yes, they've won the World Cup and what have you. So he's achieved a lot at club level and at international level, but he has his own reasons. So I do listen to him when he speaks about it. My view is that ultimately his frustration is misguided. He talks about the packed schedules. Now, I think that's a different matter. I think that's a different question to answer. When I think about, just even from the top of my head, the introduction of Nations League, the fact that European Championships was being expanded, the World Cup format's now been expanded. You've got so many more international friendlies. You've got Carabao Cup, FA Cup. So we have two domestic cups in this country. You'll know the story from last month when the Premier League were buying or looking to close in on the international TV rights for the FA Cup. That's all with a view to Premier League taking more control of scheduling and having more kind of rights of, when games will be played and what have you. So there are factors that even Premier League are assuming and wresting control, let's say, of the domestic calendar to ease, let's say, quote unquote, the burden on professional footballers. But I'd go back to the point. The single biggest generator of revenues through sponsorships is TV revenue. It's selling this product around the world. And these changes are done with a view to improving the product on the pitch, which goes a long way to facilitating strong club revenues. And my point to Rafael Varane is, you're part of a union. You can lobby together with other player representatives and you can take action if you want, industrial action. I don't care. The point is, if you want to have less games, you can take that to your union and you can see how you can put that together on the agenda to drive less or to drive more games out. But you're not necessarily complaining when your own club's doing international tours in pre-season looking to make a strong buck, or when your team's got been knocked out of the FA Cup early and they go over to Dubai for 10-day training, whatever it may be. The point I'm just making is the idea of this rule change in terms of the longer games is not to squeeze as much juice out of the football, as I absolutely believe that's not the case. What it's there to do is to improve the product, which was being taken advantage of by football players and managers and coaches, and done in a certain way to which compromise the quality of the product. And I remember watching this situation develop, and I'll give you the flow very quickly, of the situations when a team would have a defensive corner. So a team would be defending a corner, and it's the 88th minute or the 89th minute, or it doesn't even really matter so much about the minute. And there'd be a corner coming. And remember, the corner is the one corner or free kick. So always that situation where you've got a lot of bodies in a short in a short kind of area and what have you. And all that would happen is a couple of people would go up for the ball. You'd see one player clutching his head on the floor, and the referee, by default, having to respect head injuries, will stop the game, no matter what's happened. And I remember thinking, when I saw it, multiple players get hit on the shoulder or the top of the chest, all of a sudden holding their heads. And I said, this is clearly something that's being taken advantage of. They know the referee has to stop the game. The referee can't see if he's hurt his head. All he sees is a player clutching his head. And all of a sudden we'll blow the whistle, stop the game. Doesn't matter where the ball is. So you have to stop the game. It's a head injury. And I remember thinking this is leaning too much in the favor of teams that will now engage in dark arts and say to their players, if we're defending a corner and we're 1-0 up, I don't care. Whoever's going up for that ball, you just go down, just clutching your head, because the referee's at he doesn't know. Now, you may have seen yesterday when Odegaard went off. He had a proper injury, but he went off, and there was I think Sam Matterface on commentary spoke about how if you're a player who now who's injured and the physio comes on, you then have to spend 30 seconds off the field. And again, done with a view to kind of deter those kind of that gamesmanship or time wasting where you bring the physio on, you have a few drinks, you walk off to the side of the pitch and you come back on, just looking to kind of time waste. Just answer your first point very quickly before you go, Ayub. The question is, will it resolve the issue? I agree with you. Time will tell. I'm not so sure. I would have preferred the interactive game clock. And I use interactive because I'm always big on bringing the fans into the experience. And that's why we've spoken about it offline, why I'm a huge fan of American sports. It's because the interactive fan experience is amazing. You've got referees and officials speaking to the crowd, informing them of what offense had taken place, what had happened. We still haven't got to the point where we're communicating VAR decisions or that they can hear it or what's going on and what have you. It's we use the fans as some sort of, well, cash cow, but we patronize them with late kickoffs. You've got Newcastle fans traveling to Southampton last year. God knows what hour, no trains on the way back. We patronize them year in, year out because we see them as this kind of consumer kind of cash cow that we can take advantage of. But yet, in terms of immersing the fans into the overall experience, we're always kind of late to the party. Like we do it like kicking and screaming, brought into 2023, brought into the modern times. So that's my biggest frustration. But yeah, you tell me what are your thoughts with the Raphael Varane.
Yeah, I'll talk about Varane first. I mean, that if there's one thing that irritates me is when footballers make comments such as it's tiring. I mean, I suppose if you read the whole quote, he does accept that he's obviously in a privileged position. But to me, I find it quite insulting because they are enormously well paid, and I will always use that as an argument. I think some people sort of dismiss that's not something that you should be used as an argument. Modern football now have dietitians, they have experts in every field, they have large squads. I mean, he's part of what, 25? The great Ferguson used to always rotate, so the players were always fresh. So it irritates me enormously when players talk about, well, this is going to be quite tiring. We need to be performing at our peak if we're playing 100-minute games. Especially if there's congestion in the fixtures, it affects our performance. To me, that's nonsense. These are professional athletes. They are monitored. Lots of these footballers have these charts, the red zone. If they're in the red zone, they have a break. Somebody else will take their place. There is hundreds of millions of people who'd like to swap. If he's talking about hard work, he obviously hasn't lived in the real world. This, to me, is something that cannot be. You cannot be sort of saying, well, it's a physical sport. Yeah, you want to see professional athletes performing at their peak, absolutely, no question about this. But when he starts talking about, well, this is going to be too much, we're already sort of performing to a level where we're playing too many games, it's all nonsense. I mean, he's not even playing internationals now, so he's obviously going to have a lot more space, a lot more free time than other players. So that is an argument I will refuse to listen to. I don't care what arguments they provide. To me, that's not the argument. In terms of the rule, I just sort of think that, again, the FA have missed a trick. I really think the idea that you suggested about in time or in game, that to me is the most effective. That really is the most effective, because if a professional footballer knows, right, if I take 10 seconds to do the throw-in, that 10 seconds doesn't count. It's when I throw the ball. Same with a goal kick. He could be cleaning the mud off his heel. Doesn't really matter. It's when I kick the ball. That is the most effective. Maybe I suppose what we need to do is identify a time. Is it 55 minutes? Is it 60 minutes? Is it 50 minutes? Maybe that's probably the difficult part. But to me, that will be the most effective way of ensuring that there is no time wasting, because there is no point. Absolutely no point. If you're wasting time, there is no point. So that's really what I would have liked them to have at least trialed. Maybe trial it and then see if it works. If it works, great. If it doesn't, this is, again, it's dealing with a problem. But again, the FA, I think, are dealing with it perhaps in not the ideal way. But do I agree with what they're trying to do? Absolutely. Do I agree with Varane with what he's saying? Absolute. I mean, I don't want to swear, but to me, it really grinds my gears. So Varane, if you're watching this, don't even go there, pal.
You want to be careful, Ayub. You've alienated enough French people already. So
Oh yes, of course.
I think you just
He
need
is French.
yeah, you just need to be mindful right now, I would say. Yeah, and I think the only thing I would say about just to explain to our viewers the point that you just made, especially the distinction between the in-game clock. Some may say, well, we may end up with the same amount of in-game time anyway. What does it matter if we add it to the end with 10 minutes, 12 minutes added on compared to actually what you and I are advocates of, which is an actual in-game clock, which means that you determine the parameters to say, look, so maybe every throw in, maybe every throw in, every corner, every goal kick, every penalty, so the clock will actually stop. And the reason why, at least that I'm a strong proponent of that, and I'm sure you are as well, is because that enhances the experience in real time. Whereas with the other situation where you're adding on time at the end, you may reach the same conclusion at the end in terms of actual game time, but there's this inherent frustration throughout because teams will still do it where they think, even though I know 10, 12 minutes might be added on at the end, you still have to go through that experience of 90 minutes of watching a team take a little, now they'll take a little less longer because they'll think the effect is a lot less now because I know the time's going to be added on at the end. But they'll still push their luck because you never know what they might do. Is so all right, we might get away with it. Maybe they'll only add 5 instead of 7, or they'll only add 6 instead of potentially what it should have been is 9, because the referee to some extent has still got to make a judgment call as to, I think we need to add 8 or we need to add 9. I don't think there's any real science behind it. He'll make a judgment call. How many substitutions have we had? How many VAR incidents have there been to review? How many other situations during the game have resulted in me adding on a 30 seconds, another 30 seconds, another 30 seconds? I think when you think about the experience in real time, it'll improve that much more significantly if the clock stops. Now and unfortunately, we have to watch another season of Jordan Pickford taking goal kicks. But now when Jordan Pickford takes his time and tightens his gloves and does that big puffing of his chest and big breath and takes a big goal kick and what have you, you don't have to live through that anymore because trust me, I don't want to live through that again. So, I mean, it's things like that. And again, if you put the consumer first, which quite often major sports institutes don't. But if you put the sports first in terms of the sports fan, in terms of what they want to consume and what they like to consume, I think you'll find that solution is much better.
It's going to be interesting because I mean you talked about Pickford. I mean I'll make this the last comment on this, but you talked about Pickford, but that's the case at the moment. Which are referees going to consider that as time wasting? That's the point, because if they don't, then he'll continue to do that. Will there be consistency? This is where I think the FA have missed a trick, because in a sense they've made it much more complicated for them. But that's our thoughts. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So please, in the comments, put down what you consider to be the most effective way of making the game much more consumer friendly, because at the moment, obviously, the FA don't think it is. So that's our thought. And what do you think of Varane? What do you think of his comments? Do you think I'm being out of order? If you think I'm being out of order, I will be out of order if you put that comment in. All right. So excellent points. And thank you always for explaining in detail what this new ruling is all about. Right. We're on the cusp of a new season. And usually every time there's a new season, we're always talking about, right, who's going to win the league, who's going to be relegated. So we're going to do our own little prediction. There is a little caveat to this, because the transfer window ends in, is it the beginning of September or end of this month? So we have got the right, maybe based on certain transfers, that we may change our minds. But as of recording today, we're going to give our thoughts on what we consider to be the top 4 and the 3 teams that will be relegated.
Hang on, I thought we were doing that on Wednesday.
No, we were doing that on Wednesday. I thought we were doing it today.
We were doing it on Wednesday. I was like, let's do this as 2 topics, but it's fine.
What time is it?
It's been a little too long, but yeah, I think we should do that on Wednesday. Let's allow for a little bit more thought. I think.
Of course, yes. I mean, I was getting carried away.
Yeah, I think and by the way, you've
Well, at
already
least you've got a flavour. The audience have got a flavour of what we're going to talk about the next show.
yeah, absolutely. By the way, you've already told us who's getting relegated
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
quite a few times, to be honest.
Oh
So
yeah,
you've
yeah. Luton. Yeah, that's not a surprise.
okay, good. I'll let you wrap up.
Yeah, yeah. And on that note, I mean, I was going to talk about the top four and bottom three, but Otis is absolutely right. I just got carried away. This is it's a 45-minute to an hour show, not 3 hours. So I do need to respect time. We were talking about 90 minutes to 100 minutes. I need to respect time here as well. All right. So as always, let me ask you to smash a like, share with your friends, hit the notification bell, which will tell you about our next videos. What we are doing now that this season is upon us, we'll be recording probably about 2 or 3 times a week. The next one we're hoping to record on Wednesday, but we're hoping that this one drops quite quickly. Okay, so until the next time, stay on side. That's wrong as well, but who cares?
Until the next one, good night.